All right, Mindy, thank you very much for joining me today. This will be episode 4 of my Getting to Know You podcast. Let's start where it began. We have a lot to cover, I think. Where were you born?
Well, I was born in New Orleans because my hometown has no hospital. So I had to go all the way there to be born. But I was, my family home was in Poydras, Louisiana, which is what we call down the road. If you're from St. Bernard, there's up the road and there's down the road. Don't get it confused, you know. So
Gotcha.
I'm from down the road. Poydras is near Braithwaite. It is if you're going like from the Ninth Ward down, you've got the Ninth Ward, you cross into Araby, Chalmette, Miro, Violet, then Poydras. So
Okay.
that's where I'm from.
What did your parents do for a living?
So my mom was mostly a dental assistant.
Okay.
And she also, when I was growing up, after my parents got divorced, my mom cut hair after work and also cleaned houses after work, um, because she wanted us to not have our lives turned upside down too much after my parents got divorced. And we had moved into a nice subdivision with, a 2-story home. It was all the things that she ever wanted for the family. And then when my parents split, it became hard for her to afford that on her own. And instead of moving us, she took on all this extra work. So after school, we would go with her to either, and after she worked all day, we would go with her to either clean houses or cut hair in other people's houses. Sometimes they would come to us. So that's what mom did for my whole life, just until she retired a few weeks ago. Dad, at the time I was born, Dad was working for Kentwood. He was a water delivery man. Eventually
Okay.
became supervisor, and then over the course of the years has turned into a very fancy businessman. He's a
Yeah.
financial planner he has his own firm in Dallas, and he did like a total career 180.
Okay.
So
Yeah. What was you just have one brother?
so my parents had me and my brother Brad. We now share 3 acres. We're very close. My dad went on to get remarried, and he and my stepmom had 2 children. So I have 3 brothers, but I'm the oldest and the only girl. So
Good for you.
yeah.
What are your what does Brad do, and what are your I guess half siblings do?
So my brother Brad is an elevator mechanic.
Okay.
He's got endless hilarious stories about the elevator world, things you don't consider, like it's Mardi Gras traffic and people are trapped in an elevator and they're panicking. People apparently do all kinds of wild stuff in elevators when they're stuck. They throw up, they piss themselves, everything. And so my brother's like scrambling to get there, but the traffic is nuts because Mardi Gras. So he'll take a bike with him. He'll just park the elevator truck, get his tools, and ride a bike to wherever it is to get people out. He's got a lot of amazing stories about elevator.
How, how long has he been doing that?
Oh, long time now, probably 15 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. My half brothers, my brothers, they're a good bit younger than I am. So my brother Cameron is 27 now. He has a fancy art history degree, but he works at IKEA. He loves it. And my youngest brother is still actually in college. He just turned 21,
Okay.
and
What's he
he's
studying?
accounting.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good for
finance guy
him.
like that, I guess. Yeah. Mhm.
Not my jam, but somebody's got to do it.
Agreed.
Yeah. So how old were you when your parents got divorced?
I think I was 8 turning 9,
Okay.
and that was pretty wild because my parents so it didn't go very smoothly. Like we have one of these divorce stories. So like later when I got divorced, I tried to um Like my ex-husband and I, we're the best divorced people ever. I think we could host a workshop, how to get divorced. Like we got it. And part of that is because of the experiences I've had growing up, like, not unique, but difficult in all the usual ways where, mom and dad are not speaking unless they're arguing. Now that we've, separated, we are not, we have separate holidays, we have separate birthdays, one's not invited to the other thing, and all of that was very contentious. My mom was very hurt by the divorce. My dad did leave and begin a new relationship. um, it is my understanding that the relationship had begun while my parents were married, and a lot of our
Mm.
family members knew and never mentioned that. It's cool.
Well, yeah, my parents got divorced, I think, when I was 2 or under.
Okay.
So I never remembered having them live together.
Okay.
Some similarities, it sounds like, in the stories, but that'll be for
Uh-huh.
another time, I suppose. So how
Yeah.
quickly did your father remarry?
I want to say they got married, I think, when I was maybe 12. But my stepmom, who coincidentally has the same name as my mom, have two Karens, which is extra confusing. And
Yeah.
um, she she's a lovely lady. We love Karen a lot. At the time, just to like give you some like one story as a background of how I was raised. So, and this is straight up St. Bernard stuff. Okay. So my my mom had said, all right, you can't, when the kids are with you, and we saw dad like every other weekend on a Sunday, when the kids are with you, they should be with you. So, I don't want the children around any girlfriend or whoever. They should just have quality time with dad at the end. And that's not what was happening all the time. Sometimes we did go see Karen. And for the record, she was lovely and did not mistreat us. There was no danger. We were never in any danger. Okay.
Were they in Texas at the time?
They were on the West Bank.
Okay.
Uh, they didn't move to Texas till after Katrina. So one day, for whatever reason, my dad is feeling bold, I guess, and drives us home on the evening, Sunday evening, as custody arrangements call for. We pull up and we're in the car with Karen, like she's driving, and my dad is in the passenger seat and we're in the back. And my mother sees this and is like, oh, hell no. My mom runs out the door, immediately goes to the car. My dad is already getting out the car, like, oh God, here she comes, right? This argument travels onto the neighbor's lawn where my mother breaks my dad's arm on the neighbor's lawn. And then goes to the car. My brother and I are in the house, like peeking out the mini blinds, like, oh my God, mom's pounding. I remember they had this like gold Nissan Sentra. Do you remember the old Sentras? How like when you got in and the seatbelts were automatic, they would come around like this,
Yeah.
Okay, it
Right.
was one of those. And my mom had gone over to the passenger side and like banged on her window. And I remember the glass was flexing. Okay. And it
Wow.
was never right after that. But we didn't know for a long time that my mom is the reason his arm got broken. He told us the story that they told the children, was that my dad had gone to the gym and dropped a weight on his arm and broke his arm. And we always laughed about it our whole lives growing up, like, dad, so such a klutz trying to be cool at the gym and broke his arm. And finally, I was like 21 and I brought that story up, but my mom was like, okay, listen, that's not how it happened. So my
Yeah.
mom, I say all this to say, like, my mom is one of these people who will like absolutely kill you, but you want her on your team. And
Right.
also, like, while she will do these outrageous things, she also realizes the insanity of it and wants to protect us from it. It's a wild mix of things. It's a little bit like, do you remember the show Roseanne?
Huh?
Okay, I grew up on the set of Roseanne. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Where it was like very, loud, boisterous, blue collar. We got regular people problems, but also, we're close and we're going to get on the sofa, we're going to eat chips and we're going to get under blankets and we're going to rag each other and then we're going to love each other to death. We're obsessed with each other. We all live on the same street. You
Right.
understand? My brother is in my backyard. My mom, and my second mom, which we'll talk about, they live right down the street. Like we are the blood in each other's veins. You understand?
Hmm.
So
Does that get tough?
not for me. Probably you might have to ask my sister-in-law. She might feel differently. She's the only one out of this that's, has married into the family. I try to keep like in my little house here
Yeah.
and not irritate. I let them come to me
Uh-huh.
because I understand boundaries and all of that.
Sure.
Mom, not so much. Mom's like just come in, doing whatever she
Yep.
wants.
Well, good for her.
But we wouldn't have it any other way. That's another thing about St. Bernard people. We had a family compound down there that got Katrinaed, and we tried to recreate it the best we could, but when you're from there, you stick together, and even though we all ended up over here, we've still arranged our outcomes so that we're all up in each other's shit.
Yeah. And you're in Abita Springs, right?
uh kind of.
Or nearish?
It's Mandeville, which
Okay.
really bums me out, but we missed Abita Springs by one street. So like I've got 1 foot in Mandeville, 1 foot in Abita. So it feels like Abita. It
Well,
does not feel like Mandeville.
who was I guess, the pioneer that brought your little clan there first?
So over here, it was my mom. I was already on the North Shore at the time of Katrina because my husband at the time, he works at Stennis Space Center, and it was an easier commute for him from the North Shore than St. Bernard. So that we were
Okay.
already here, and good thing because we were the only people left who had a home on both sides of the family. Everyone lost everything. So we had a lot of bodies on the floor in our house for a while, which is interesting because we also had a newborn. My son Quinn was born in May before Katrina. So I'm like up in the night stepping over bodies trying to make bottles and stuff. It
Yeah.
was wild. It was a wild time. But so we were in Slidell at the time.
Okay.
When everything got lost in Katrina, there was a string of like 6 brand new construction houses on this road, and another great St. Bernard story. A St. Bernard family friend realized that there were 6 brand new houses still under construction that made it through the storm just fine, and they started calling St. Bernard people so that in a row you could have 6 St. Bernard people together.
Yeah.
And it worked. They all bought a house. So they had like an instant little St. Bernard down the street. And one day, just on the way there, this piece of property became for sale because after Katrina in St. Tammany, there was a big need for, housing. And so people who were landowners here who hadn't been using the land for much, just holding on to it for whatever reason, started selling all that off, profit. People were looking for other places to be, so that's how we ended up here. Mom sold her house. My mom was lucky. Katrina only had 5 feet of water, which is pretty miraculous for St. Bernard Parish, considering, I mean, really, the house was on the levee, which is 17 feet above sea level. So she only had about 5 feet. It still ruined everything, right? Because it sat for so long. But compared to everybody else's, 20 to 30 feet, it was pretty good, right? So she was able to sell it rather quickly. And because she is an actual angel of the Lord, when this piece of property came for sale, she bought it for me and my brother to share.
Okay.
So that we could be real close to her forever.
Yep. Her dream, huh? Was she remarried by that point?
Oh, no, but that's a whole other amazing thing. So, my mom got married officially in, I think it was 2014 maybe. And my mom married Gina. And so I say I have 2 moms because I do, but for all intents and purposes, they really did raise me. And how that worked was we used to go to this daycare way down in Poydras, And it was this not a great place, but you can imagine there's not a lot of options, right? And so my brother, Brad, had asthma. No one knew it yet because he was an infant. And he had stopped breathing one day in the baby room in his little crib in the daycare, and Gina was working there. She had dreams of becoming a nurse, but didn't feel like she could do that. She was 19. She had just graduated from high school and was working several jobs to help take care of. She was the oldest of five, um, low income household. She was trying to support her mom. So she was working in this baby room, didn't really have any formal training in childcare, but saw that my brother was not breathing, and they were able to save him. And what do you do when someone saves your kid, right? How can you possibly repay that favor? So my mom had, taken an interest in trying to get to know Gina. What is it that you need, right? Like, you fulfilled this need. What can we do?
Right.
And so we ended up, when my parents were still married, we took Gina in, and my mom's, point was, if you really want to help your family, probably the best thing you can do is get an education, um, get the job that you're after. That's going to put you in a position to better help everybody else. If you're working 3 part-time jobs forever, this is not the answer. So the deal was, we moved her in, and she was sort of like a live-in helper babysitter. And in exchange, she didn't pay rent or anything. She just went to school. That was the point. My parents ended up getting divorced a couple of years after this. And even though we had spent all this time and money to convert the garage into an apartment for Gina, I think it's convenient for a lot of people to say that it was this relationship that drove my parents apart. My mother does not feel that way. My mother says that she loved my dad, married him on purpose, had these kids, wanted this life. It did not work. Then a relationship began with Gina at some point, and they hid it from us for years, which sounds crazy because we all lived in the same house. Like, how could we not know? But we truly didn't. Because again,
Right.
my mother was like Roseanne in this way that it's like, no bullshit, no nonsense. I'm going to tell you how it is. No shame, take it or leave it, love it or hate it, whatever. Right. And so when she was telling, people would of course bring it up sometimes, or like kids at school would mention it, and we would mention it, and they denied it every time, all the time. And we really thought, like, mom does not lie. She does not hide who she is or what we're doing ever. Okay. She's fist fighting on the neighbor's lawn. She does not care. Okay. So we really believed her. And so it wasn't until we were grown adults, like after Katrina is the thing, because Gina did become a nurse, a very good one, and has held many administrative roles in healthcare. And Gina was at Baptist Hospital or Memorial Hospital throughout Katrina. She had to work. We had to leave her there and evacuate without her. She was part of Dr. Poe's trial. There's the Apple TV show that just came out, 5 Days at Memorial. There's a character on the show who plays my mama Gina.
Yeah.
Because it was her entire testimony is in a book that the New York Times, a New York Times reporter, Sherry Fink, wrote up. The show is based on the book. And it was a traumatizing time, obviously, for everybody, especially healthcare workers who were there in the midst of all this, right? And when we finally got Gina back after those few days, we were evacuated in New Roads. And I remember my mom had had enough. And she was like, okay, you've done enough. There's nothing else you can do, right? She and my brother borrowed a gun from someone and drove down to the city. And we were like, you're getting in the car. You are done. Okay. They go rescue her. We get her back. This is like day 5, I guess, Katrina. And I remember she comes in, she's in the same scrubs, and they were like stuck to her body from the amount of sweat and all the other bodily fluids she had acquired from
Sure.
all the patients she was dealing with. And we were trying to get her undressed, and her skin was peeling off with her scrubs. And she was just in such a bad way. And my mom told me after that, about a year after that, that was for her the moment where she could not pretend anymore that this was not an actual loving relationship. It was not normal to just act like, this was just your friend and your roommate who was working and everything's fine here. That this was, actual life or death. This was real traumatic, event that caused Gina a lot of PTSD and therapies and everything else over the years. And so they had to finally admit, maybe even to themselves.
Right.
So it wasn't until we were plenty grown adults that they even talked about it to us. And it was so funny because what do we care? Like, we were not the ones they should have been afraid to tell. We were raised to, to be open, even though we went to Catholic school, and that is definitely a no-no, right?
Yeah.
You don't get divorced, you don't have a same-sex relationship, right? She put us through all those schools, and I mean, we had to make our confirmation everything. My brother was an altar boy. It was a whole thing. Okay.
Hmm.
Even still, in our home, our values did not align with that, but they were still very afraid to talk about it. And that maybe is just their generation.
Yeah.
Eventually we had like an entire wedding ceremony. We had to go out to Long Beach, California, because it wasn't legal yet here in
Right.
Louisiana. We had a ceremony, a reception back here when it was done, and they finally got to just be who they were. And all the horrible things that they thought were going to happen did not
Right.
happen.
Nothing at all.
No. Everybody
Right.
was like, cool, we knew.
Right. About
Right.
time.
Right. Come
All
on.
right. Well, let's backtrack a little bit. So, were you drawn to anything um, academically growing up?
Yes. I loved books. I loved to read. I used to play librarian. Um, and I would organize my books. I made my own Dewey Decimal System and cut like little pieces of paper. I had a whole coding system, and I taped them onto the spines of the books. And I used to make my friends come over. When my friends would come over, we'd play library, and they got to check out a book, I played teacher too, for sure. But my first big love was reading. So always very interested in language arts. Love to read, love to write. And as is the classic, um, case with that, other things suffered, like math. I'm one of those people. So yes, that was my big thing.
Okay. What I know I've seen photos and over the years, but was the Magic School Bus a pretty big player in your development?
I mean, actually, no. But what's funny is that I have grown up to basically being Miss Frizzle. You know,
Right.
I get stopped in the store all the time. People will tell me, like, "You look like Miss Frizzle," and I say, "I am." You know,
Yeah.
I've given autographs as Miss Frizzle just to like delight
Really?
a kid in the Walgreens. Yeah, what are you gonna do if a kid come up to you and says, "Are you Miss Frizzle?" Like, I'm about to disappoint. Yes, I am. Hello.
Right.
Would you like an autograph?
Right. Good for you.
You know?
So did your academic pursuits change or develop in high school?
No, it was the only thing I was good at. Um,
Okay.
that was a common thread I had. Um, I was in all the honors classes. I was deeply interested in reading. I was the only kid who ever did the summer reading. I was annotating. I was writing about it. And it's a shame, like we didn't have the internet yet. Or maybe it's a good thing. I probably would have never left the house again because I was so I was conducting my own deep dives into this
Sure.
stuff, with the very limited, St. Bernard Parish resources that I had. But I had a couple of teachers that were very helpful. And I remember one time I turned in a piece I had written, and it said, "See me" on the back, and there was no grade on it. And I was like, oh my God, I've blown it. And he said, this is very good, not just because you're in 11th grade and you followed the directions, but this is very good. And he put me on to, there was a publication called the Parish Magazine at the time, and he was part of the staff. And so I got to write for he put me in touch with the people, and I got to go write articles for the magazine, which stretched me a little bit because I hadn't done any journalistic style writing. I'd only
Right.
done creative writing or academic writing. So that was really fun. I enjoyed that a lot. And for a minute, I thought I wanted to do that, go be a journalist. But I ended up being drawn to something else. I loved book clubs, and I was perpetually disgusted with every book club I'd ever joined because it's all bullshit. It ends up being like some lame ass ladies shit where they bring the book, like the book is present, it's in your hands, but nobody ever wants to talk about it. You're really just there to have snacks and wine. And I'm like, this is not, I want to get into it. Okay.
Right.
And no, everyone was letting me down. You know what I mean? So I had this idea, like, why can't a classroom be a book club? Why are we not, can we get young people to engage in texts in this like workshop style, and not just, assigned readings where you're going to read at home and you're going to answer the questions and you're going to bring it back. I'm not saying there's not value in that. Sometimes there is. But what is the end goal? Sure, we're trying to, hit some basic academic standards here, but can it be something more than that? Can we go on a different level here? Can we like touch souls? Okay, now
Yeah.
this is idealistic Mindy in the year 1999, and that is how I ended up at SLU in the education department. I did get a degree in English education. I was going to go be an English teacher, and save the world, or at least the young people, at least the youth of America,
Yeah.
with literature. And that did not happen at
Did
all.
did you go to work? Did you go to work as a teacher in the
Mm,
interim?
I did go to work as a teacher. I went to work immediately. I graduated on a Saturday, and I showed up in a classroom on Monday. I was a December graduate. And so,
What were you teaching then? And what
oh,
grade level?
I was teaching 7th grade history at Chalmette Middle School. It was my first teaching job. And every day, this is terrible, I would drive across the Twin Span on the way into the school, and I would pray. There'd be all these 18-wheelers driving by, and I would pray for one of them to hit me. Like, I didn't want to die, obviously. But what I did want, I wanted like both my legs broken so I could not possibly drive there. And I would just have to say, sorry, now I need a leave of absence. Can't make
Right.
it. Bye.
Right.
It was so soul crushingly bad. It was so painful. I showed up on that Monday. I didn't have a class roster. I didn't have like the teacher edition of the textbook. I didn't have the last lady's grade book. She had gotten into a car accident and was on medical leave of absence. This is where the idea generated, because as I was driving, I was like, this is what happened. She finally got what she was praying for. And now she's laid up with her back surgery, and I'm the schmuck here. Okay, got it.
Right.
But
Right.
she had her stuff with her, so like, and nobody was going to aggravate this lady. She had back surgery, so I was just screwed, and no one cared. No one cared. It was rough. It was really, the culture was very toxic. It was overcrowded. It was these poor kids. Some of them were 15 in 7th grade. I had a couple that could only make the letters of the alphabet that were in their names, like had slipped through the cracks so many times. Lots of, clearly there were so many diagnoses that never got addressed,
Right.
and so many hardships in these families, and then they're sitting in your 7th grade American history class. They don't give a shit, and of course they don't. Why would they? That's fair. Like, of course you don't want to talk about the Transcontinental Railroad today. Of course
Right.
not. So that was very eye-opening to me. What the ideal of what an education department will build up for you, and not that they're wrong to do that, but then what the reality is, where it starts to feel like the entire system is just made to grind everybody down. It's not inspired. It's certainly not respectful to anybody there. One of the most interesting things was, to me, when I reflect back on education departments and teaching, was I had this class at SLU called classroom management. It's a standard course everybody has to take if you're going to be a teacher. And they talk to you about things like, some practical things like, okay, you're going to have some garbage cans in your room. So you're going to want to think about where those garbage cans can best serve the traffic flow of your classroom. And I was like, oh, this is very exciting. I never considered this before. I was very excited about like the idea of trash cans being part of your management.
Placed correctly. Yeah.
Yeah. They were right, by the way. Totally matters. Anyway, one of the things that blew my mind was the first day of this class. Now, this is all in the context of 9/11. Okay. So 9/11 happens. The world is reeling, right? Certainly America is. And everybody's having this like, do you remember how that felt after, where people felt this like deep need to be kind and extend courtesy and rethinking our values, and not just within the context of our own families, but our neighbors, our larger extended community, right? Things felt softer.
Mhm.
While this conversation is going on at the local and state and national level, this instructor tells us, okay, classroom management, first thing you need to do, you have 5 minutes. You need to develop a mean teacher face, and you have to do it in front of all of us. And I was so appalled by that, but I did it, like you had to, right? And so we're all looking at each other, like testing out our mean faces and like very seriously critiquing, like, you're kind of smirking. I think they could interpret that as you're just playing. If you really want to assert your dominance, you should probably get an eyebrow going. Like, ridiculous. Like, this was the message. We're going to control the children with mean faces. And then we had to we were given the old advice about don't smile until Christmas, you know. And that was so wild to me, but I did it. And when I got in the classroom, what you do is, when I walked into the 7th grade classroom, I did those things. You do feel like you have to assert this dominance over the children, but that is an error. That is a mistake, because it's, when you do that, you're just engaging them in this power dynamic that is not productive. I'm not saying we should let kids do whatever they want. Obviously, that's a terrible idea. What I am saying is that what I had to find out in my own way over time, spending almost 20 years now in the classroom, is that it has to be relationships first, the end. These kids, especially when they're, grade 7 and above, maybe even 5th grade and above, where they're starting, they're adolescents now. They're feeling things on a whole new level. They're having their own identity crises. They're realizing for the first time that their parents are probably people, and they're flawed, and they're so disappointed in them, and they're coming with all their baggage,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you have to see them, and you have to let them see you a little bit too, in ways that are appropriate for, a classroom. That was really it was so sad to me. And years later, when I ended up taking Montessori training, the first day of Montessori classroom training, I kid you not, I died laughing. It was like, oh, you love children. Good, great. But do you love yourself? Do you love the universe? Do you love all the living things within it? And I was like, what is happening here? And there was a part of me that felt like, is this a Twilight Zone? Did I just step into some like new age woo woo situation? I didn't. It was really what they were getting at was that if you're really going to be in a leadership position of young people who are impressionable and sensitive and delicate and fragile, then you have to be as fully formed of a person as you possibly can be. And you have to be responsible for yourself. And you have to be responsible for the things that are going to come out of your mouth. And you have to be responsible for instilling this, like, deep love and respect of all things into the children in every little way that you can, so that you can try to promote a greater culture of peace and respect. Like that's what the Montessori training was compared
Right.
to make your mean teacher face, don't smile until Christmas. And I had to back my way out of all of that traditional training.
How long were you at Chalmette Middle?
Oh, listen, not long at all. I finished that semester and I was out of there. I could
What
not.
was what was the progression until, of course, you began your own school?
Mm. I went to work for Andrew Jackson High School the following year, where my mother went to school, where I went to school. Then I went back to teach there, as you do. That was a much better experience. I loved the kids. I taught 10th grade, so that English. So it was part composition and part literature. And I remember this is though when I started to see so many of the flaws in the system too. When I finally got to teach the subject I was trained to teach, I had to do Julius Caesar, which is kind of a cruel joke because they got this great line that goes, "Peace, ho!" Okay, teach that to a group of 15-year-old Chalmette kids. See how that goes for you, right?
Yeah,
Every
right.
time they saw me in the hallway, it was like, peace, hoo, hoo, hoo. And what are you going to do? You just have to laugh at them. It was
Yeah,
their way of trying to, like, you could get mad about it, but for what? We were trying to do a thing, and you got to do a thing sometimes. Okay. But what was interesting about it was, you know, the kids were, many of them were stumbling over basic phonics. So, like a word like people, I remember specifically, you've got a silent O. It's
hmm,
spelled real, it's not a great spelling considering the sound of the word, right? So they were
right.
stumbling over words like that, and no one addressed it. Meanwhile, I was expected to teach Shakespeare, and it was infuriating to me. Like, how many times are we going to get this wrong? Can we hit the things that matter, like literacy first? You know, and of all the Shakespeare things, Julius Caesar was not the greatest choice for this crowd. It was not a story they felt particularly drawn to. A lot of these kids are, they're going to grow up, they're going to do other things. The families are not valuing this type of education. There are other things we could have chosen. But again, I was handed a script. I had no autonomy in the classroom. You get a script, and these are the things you have to teach. It doesn't matter that a third of the kids are so far below this mark that they're not ready. It doesn't matter that a handful of them are way above this mark and can do something way else. Nothing matters. This is what you do, the end. I don't even know what I went to school for at this point. I'm standing there thinking like they could have plucked anyone off the street to do this job. What am I doing?
Right.
Um, so I got out of there because it did not feel like I wasn't able to do anything that I thought would be valuable in the classroom. I certainly couldn't meet any needs. So what was the point? I left. I went to work for Baptist Hospital. I quit teaching altogether. I had an office with a bathroom in it, and it was so quiet that like my ears actually, like, they didn't hurt, but I had this, like, my ears had this actual like physical reaction to the silence of an office after so long in schools, you know?
Yeah.
And it was just, I had a whole hour for lunch. I had a lunch break. I made more money. I was very happy.
Yeah.
Um,
What were you doing at the hospital?
Payroll.
Okay.
Payroll and benefits. Loved it. Would have stayed. But my first day on the job, very first day on the job, I got home. I wasn't feeling great. I got home and took a pregnancy test and found that I was pregnant my very first day on the job. Had the baby in May, stopped working shortly before that, and was on maternity leave. Katrina came.
Right on time for a storm. Yeah.
Right. Everything stopped. Right. So I didn't work. I stayed home for a year and a half with the baby. And then by chance was looking for a way to get back into the classroom part-time, take the baby with me, stumbled upon a Montessori program just on a recommendation that it was clean and safe. And at the time, those were my only real priorities. And then I realized the difference when I walked in that, okay, Montessori schools are schools that are designed for the children, not for the adults.
Not for the system.
Not for the system and not for the grown-ups. It's hard to even find a piece of furniture you can fit in comfortably. I mean, everything is for the kids. And
Right.
I love that, first of all. Everything is tiny. Everything is sized for the kids. Everything is light enough that they can pick up. Everything is designed that they can fully function as independently as possible in their own space. How lovely. They don't have to sit down. If they need something, they can go get it. And we trust them enough. I remember feeling that, like, oh my God, they trust these kids. Look at them. They're cutting apples with knives. They're 5.
But so were you teaching kindergarten when you started?
I started there just assisting in the pre-K kindergarten class. Montessori classrooms are mixed age classes. Decided I
Okay.
wanted to go take the training and become a Montessori teacher. That took a minute. Got that done. I taught a mixed age class of first, second, and third graders for a few years. Scooted around to a few schools, Montessori schools, and I thought that I lived in St. Tammany, still do, looked around, counted up the number of Montessori programs that only went through kindergarten, and thought might be valuable to have an elementary program here. And so my co-teacher at the time, we decided to open our own school offering not just pre-K kindergarten, but also an elementary program. And for all this time, I believe we still have the only one. The school is still the only one that offers a full accredited Montessori elementary program in St. Tammany Parish.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what was, well, let me switch topics for just a second. What did your first husband do for a living? You said worked at Dennis?
Mm-hmm. He is a physicist for the Navy.
Okay.
A lot of that's classified. I have no idea what he's doing on it.
I remember years back, I asked him in a bar what the hell it was he did, and he started telling me, but it went right over my head.
Yes, is a lot of that. It's like project based, right? So there's not like one thing he's going and like doing
Right.
every day. So the Navy will have needs, and he is the anti-submarine warfare expert for the Gulf of Mexico. So part of what he's doing is helping patrol those waters. But there's also lots of other projects too, like the Navy might need some logistics advice.
Mm-hmm.
How can we patrol X amount of water, in the shortest amount of time and use the least amount of resources, figure it out, stuff like that.
And he's been doing that for how long?
Since I've known him.
Forever?
Yeah, it was his only professional job, like out of school. And he's done it ever since. So that's probably almost 25 years now.
Okay. And I believe I saw a ring on it, my friend.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit more about that.
Oh, okay. So it's very funny because I did a little switcheroo, not by design, but the way life laughs in your face, right? So my first husband was 10 years older than me. well, 9 years older than me. Master's in physics, legitimate genius. I feel he's the only person in my life that I know that I could say is actually, he would disagree, but I'm telling you, he's like something else.
I've met him.
He's not like the rest of us. Okay.
I've met him. I know.
Okay. Like there used to be stacks of algebra textbooks on the nightstand on his side of the bed. Because he sometimes needed to consult those for whatever longhand physics he was going to be doing, whatever problem he was going to solve, right? Very tall, very white collar, very cerebral, and then dark hair, the whole thing. Adam, person I will be marrying very shortly, short, blue collar, red hair, covered in tattoos, ear gauges, boat captain, and on his nightstand there's like empty beer cans, a knife, the TV remotes,
Right.
So the juxtaposition always makes me laugh.
What can you tell me about his career in maritime?
He has been a boat captain now for about a year. He was deckhanding before that. And went out and got his certification, his 1-ton certification. I believe he wants to go back for some additional ones once he's earned the sea time. You can't just go do that, right? You have to collect so many miles out on the water before you're eligible. So I think he's got some other goals in mind. But right now he works out of Venice. The company is YNS Marine. It sounds to me, I might describe this wrong, but this is how I describe it. It sounds like they're sort of like a courier service for the oil platforms.
Okay.
And not just a courier service, they're also the emergency boat service for a lot of the platforms out there. So the platforms are required to have a boat 24/7. So sometimes that means Adam's boat is tied up out there at the platform in case there's an emergency. Sometimes people have to get off. Somebody's having a baby, somebody's got COVID, somebody got hurt, and they can't get a helicopter out there. He's got to go drive somebody back in. He brings them their groceries. If something broke and they need a mechanic, he'll go to the dock, pick up the mechanic, bring them back, that kind of thing. So he's gone. He works 14 and 7. So he's home about every third week. And I think this is why it works so well with us, because I'm a lot and he's a lot. And so just when, we're ready to kill each other, it's time to go.
Right. See you in 2 weeks.
This is it.
All right. So covered that. And you said how old are your kids? What are they up to?
My son Quinn is 17. My son Luke will be 13 next month.
And how are they doing in school? Do they have any aspirations at this point?
All right. So Quinn, my older son, we thought we were really good parents. But it turned out we just had this really good kid. Okay. And we didn't know that until we had the second one. And we were like, oh my God, we have no idea what we're doing. We're terrible parents. Because Quinn has just been very easy and lovely. Like he really does wake up in the morning and get fully dressed and emerges from his room in an outfit. And he's like, hi, Mom, good morning. He's out on the porch with the dog. He's like, it's a beautiful day. He's 17. Why is he so delightful? I don't know. But he just is. We skipped like the whole annoying teenage years. Like it never happened. I've never even seen him have a bad day. When he does, he's just like, well, that sucked. He's got this like superpower where he does not take things personally ever. And so like one time there was a kid at school his freshman year. This kid kept stomping on his shoes at PE. And Quinn did not like that, in my mind, I'm like, what? Punch him. What? Like, what? Stand up for yourself. And he's like, I get the feeling that there's like something going on there. Like he either has a diagnosis that he doesn't know about, or he thinks that this is how you interact. Like, I don't think he's trying to hurt me. I think he thinks maybe we're going to bro it out and like do this thing, you know?
Hmm.
And I just love that about him because he could like zoom out and be objective, be like, he's going through something, I guess. I'm going to let him slide, you know?
Yeah.
He's lovely. He's a very talented musician, like his dad. His dad plays piano, violin, guitar, but mostly guitar. Quinn is in the talented music program for piano. He's very good. And he also makes a ton of electronic music, records all his own sounds. He doesn't use anything preset. It's very creative arts kind of kid. He is interested in going out to ULL for their sound design program.
Okay.
So that's his goal. He's a junior now. Luke is a lot like me, which is a problem because the biggest struggle we have in our lives is we can never decide when to be right about it and when to be smart about it.
All right.
Usually we choose to be right about it.
Yeah.
And that just brings, endless stress and headache and turmoil. But we were right because we're petty assholes like that, I guess. So that's his current struggle. He is now in public school setting for the very first time after having only been a Montessori student. Same thing for Quinn. He went through Montessori school through grade 8 and then entered public high school. And so he's struggling. He's struggling with the whole system and how, disrespectful it is, like from the top down.
Hmm.
And he does not love it. He does tell me that it feels like it's scratch and claw survival. It's prison culture. Everyone, he also describes it as Hunger Games, and everyone has a turn being Katniss. It's the focus is no longer learning. The focus is how do I survive this day? And it's not just the kids, unfortunately, it's a lot of the adults. He has gotten suspended for pushing back after he was pushed repeatedly. Loved it. Loved that story. He and some friends did report a teacher because they felt like the teacher had been consistently verbally abusive to the children. So they went and filed reports. Luke is not going to start a problem, but he will be a problem.
Yeah.
And I'm the same way. And so is my mother. And so I know that this is who we are, but it's also hard to raise a kid in that, you don't want, it's that old fine line of like, you want him to defend himself. You don't want the system to grind him down to shit, but also he has to learn how to cope within this environment too. It's
Right.
like, it's only hurting him to be upset every day,
Right.
So he is a very strong ELA student. He loves to write. He loves to read. He loves to debate. It wouldn't surprise me if he would go into something like that.
Okay. All right. Well, let's backtrack to the development of your own Montessori school. How did that begin? How was the first year? How is it now?
Well, I guess it started probably because of, my own pride. like, like all big projects do, like I could do a better job. Right.
Right.
But you know what? I think I did though. I think I did do a better job than the other places I was teaching at. I've never had any classes about how to be a school leader. I basically just looked at all the other school leaders I had worked under and just let those qualities define my own as a leader. So here's what I'm not going to do. I didn't have a good model to emulate. I had a model of things to avoid. So we chose Abita Springs for the school because really it was the only affordable real estate in St. Tammany Parish. The closer you get to the lake, the higher everything becomes. And we're just teachers, right? We don't like have stacks of money lying around to go develop a thing. So we leased a beautiful 100-year-old house. Over the years, it grew into 3 schoolhouses. People
Okay.
stop by sometimes and tell us, like, my grandmother was born in this house. Or sometimes people will say, I was born in this house. Or my grandparents, this was a hotel in the 20s. And my grandmother and my grandfather came here on their honeymoon. And so the buildings have all this beautiful old Abita history. The first year we started with we had 21 kids total. And by year 2, we had more than doubled that. We have the capacity for 100 kids. And that's it. We considered several times over the years purchasing a larger piece of property and developing a campus. But I really like the micro school movement after having taught in 2 really big public schools. The root, I think, of so many of the problems that public schools experience is just there's too many people under one roof. And if you listen to teacher complaints, so much of it boils down to that. The classrooms are overcrowded. This means they can't possibly meet anybody's needs. They can't even work closely enough with the children to identify any strengths and weaknesses, really. They're bogged down in paperwork. Then it's that many sets of parents to deal with. It's that, all the data that comes with that. It's overwhelming. The job becomes undoable. And if we could just cut down classroom sizes, if we could just take the schools, like just build more of them, smaller. I think that teachers would be a lot happier. And I think kids would be a lot happier. And I think we'd have a lot less of the problems that we experience. But I'm a big fan of the small school movement because I've done it for the last 11 years and it's very effective. And it creates what you're after. It creates a community for your kids to be part of while they're not with you, where they can, it's like it's a micro community. It's a micro world for them to function within. And then they take that out into the real world and they know how to conduct themselves, right? It's beautiful. So that's what we've been doing all these years.
And that goes through grade 8?
Mhm.
Okay.
So I'm in my last year there. I sold my 50% share of the school over the summer. And I will remain there through May of this year. I think I mentioned Montessori classes it's a mixed age class setting, right? And so you keep the same kids for a few years, 3 years. So some of these kids, you become very close to them. They become like family, and so do their families. You get to know everybody. And I had a group of kids this year, including some staff kids that I didn't want to ditch. It would have been it's their last year here too.
Right.
I didn't want to run out the door and abandon them. So I'm back for just this last year to finish up with this group of kids. And then I don't know what.
Okay.
But it's been a very wild, high speed adventure when you open a business and you have to like run it.
Yeah.
Because it's there's so many things you learn that you didn't know you had to know, like fire code and health code, and how many toilets you need and how wide the doorways have to be, and all the things. And so you're in a constant state of what's the next step? Find out the next step, do it. Find out the next step, do it. And you're just sprinting at all times. And it is exhausting. I very sad to leave my business and my school. It's been a crisis, a personal crisis for sure. I'm extremely passionate about young people education, Montessori education. Not that it's perfect, it has its flaws like everything else. But I've also spent the time and energy to try to solve some of those things that I felt like I had made a lot of progress in, as not just a school leader, but as an educator. That's an important point. I never stopped teaching this entire time. So yes, I, co-owned the school and was dealing with all of that, but also was a full-time classroom teacher. I like that model, even though it's hard, because so many times administrators lose sight of what's going on in the classroom. They're too far removed and they start setting these unrealistic expectations. It's a real problem in education. And I never wanted that. Plus I like the kids. Plus I like to teach them. That's the fun part, but it felt like the right thing to do was I never, as a leader, wanted to ask anybody to do anything that I was not doing myself. So kids are throwing up at school, I'm cleaning chunks of carrot off the walls like everybody else. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I'm grading, papers like everybody else. I'm doing report cards like everybody else. I'm calling home like everybody else. I'm doing all the things. So when you have that kind of environment, the staff, the faculty and staff, it builds a real mutual respect and a solidarity, because they don't feel, the leader is not barking down. The leader is on the ground pointing the way. And that was my goal. And I've been extremely involved all these years. Like, to a degree that was probably detrimental to my own mental health, and certainly detrimental to my family. I have absolutely put the school and everybody else's kids before my own many times, in the name of the greater good, right? In the name of, this is not just for me and my kids, this is about everybody's kids.
Right.
Everybody wants to talk about, be the village. It takes a village. Well, go fucking be the village.
Right.
And it's not good for you a lot of times. It's hard to be the village.
Yeah.
You need to step away sometimes. And when you co-own a business for a long time, people change. And I do feel that over the years, our leadership styles had diverged and our values were no longer aligning. And because I am probably difficult and unwilling to compromise on some things, if my name is going to be on it, then I want it to be exactly the way I think is best. There are some things I will budge on, but not the big things. And I will walk away rather than compromise what I think are the founding principles and values. Does that make sense?
Sure. No, I think your results do speak for themselves. I've seen the Facebook posts of the kids that certainly have an affection for you.
Oh, I love them so much. And it's so great to, all these years later, even I have a few from when I taught at the high school.
Okay.
We'll get in touch. Like, just a couple weeks ago, I was helping write a resume. She's 34.
Okay.
I'm so old that my former students are now 34.
Yeah.
And, she wanted me to look at her resume, helped her with that. And, another one was trying to apply online for a job, but for whatever reason, her computer was broken. So we FaceTimed, and as she's telling me, I'm typing her words for her to apply for the job online.
Yeah.
Because she was having technical difficulties. I keep in touch with a lot of them all the time. And I'm so proud of that, because that's what it's about. You should be able to reflect back on your school experience and have it feel like it was, you were in the care of someone, or someone was in the care of you. What is it? What am I trying to say? The person who was in charge of you deeply cared.
Right.
Not just about your grade, but about who you were and your development, and are you okay, and what do you like, And what are you good at? And what do you need help with? And, all these things. And I think kids understand authenticity, and kids understand, who's on their side or not.
Hmm.
And I think it's something that's missing in the traditional program is because I've done both, right? Got the good old fashioned education degree. I've got the Montessori certifications. And so much of it is there's not enough time spent on who the children are developmentally and matching curriculum to their developmental needs. It's not there. And that's so much of, the conflict in traditional classrooms. The Montessori program, Dr. Montessori, was brilliant for that, because certainly, at the time she was doing this work, kids were not particularly valued. Are you kidding me? The early 1900s, there was still child labor going on, like we weren't, no one cared about these kids. So the fact that someone took the time to study them and actually applied the science, really it's the scientific method applied to education. What do we want kids to know, and how can we teach them in the way that they can learn it? Let's observe and experiment. And the
Hmm.
result is what we call the Montessori method. She will say that, I didn't invent it. The children informed me of what
Right.
it was that they needed. And then I just did that, and oh, look at that, it works. So what you're really seeing is, when I say I keep in touch with these kids and I've been able to, form lasting bonds with them, that really, the credit there is really Dr. Montessori, for informing all of us that we're supposed to, we're supposed to be rooting for these kids. We have to identify their needs in every level and match their work to it. And when you do that, then you can teach the whole child. So tired of hearing that. You could pull up probably a website for almost any school around here, and they'll tell you they teach the whole child. No, they don't. They can't. They're not even set up for it. Even if you have wonderful teachers who are trying to, they can't. They're handed a script like everybody else, like I was, and this is what they're doing today, the end. They can't even use their intelligence to hit the pause button and say, this is not what's best for these kids in front of my eyes right now. Like,
Right.
why is it that I cannot look at the human beings in front of me and make a decision? You know, um, I think that's the key, is trying not to forget that the children in front of you are people.
Right.
And, you can't just look at them with mean faces and hope it's going to work out.
Well, thank you for carrying that torch for sure.
Well, I carried it this long. I don't know what I'll do next. There's no other Montessori programs really in town that um, offer the elementary portion. Um, I don't know. I don't know what I'll do. So I'm at a crossroads, and that's been a whole other thing. I go to a very dark place because I had not anticipated how much of this has been attached to my identity.
Hmm.
And then that led to a whole, thought process about careers and, what is it that we're doing when we work? Are we our jobs? Um, should we be?
Right.
Can't we, is there shame, or why were we made to feel shame? I was made to feel shame if I chose a job that wasn't meaningful or purposeful. I was the first person in my family to um, graduate from college, and that carried a lot of pressure. I was supposed to go to school and pick something I love to do and make a career out of it, and not just work a 9 to 5, but get in there and make a difference, um, and I did, and that comes with a heavy price. It's tremendously burdensome, not, of course, there are, lots of pros to go along with it, but now that this part is over, I'm reflecting, like, should I have just stayed in the payroll office and just minded my business, you
Hmm.
know? And just like got home and had time and brain space and energy to explore my hobbies that I haven't been able to touch because every waking second of my life I've been tethered to a school. I mean, it's every last thing. It's like, it's going to freeze. I got to get over there and make sure all the water is running. I mean, you can't go out of town with that. I mean, owning a business is tremendous amount of work and responsibility, and you have to be there. You have to be present. Your body has to be near it at all times. Now what? Now what do I do?
Well, what hobbies and interests do you have aside from what you has been obviously a passion project for a number of years?
I really
Like
like,
what do you think you missed out on maybe?
yeah, I know. And that's a good question, because I'm just now thinking about it, like what I have been doing. I really like, I love to write. Don't do that at all. Have not been able to do that. Because it just requires me to be in a space where I feel free enough mentally to do it. Have not been there at all. I miss that because this job is very emotional, and it's very, even though it's not personal, it kind of is. Like, you're not supposed to take things personally at work, right? Except that my personality as a teacher sort of defines the dynamic. So it is personal when I have to sit down and have very difficult parent teacher conferences. It's going to be the way it is, in part because of who I am and the things that I'm communicating. So I've missed an outlet, if for nothing else, being able to have an outlet for all of that. Because I don't know a lot of other school leaders. And so when you try to share things, you don't have anybody who has lived it really. So I should have been writing about it. Probably I did not. Certainly didn't explore any creative writing projects. I love to read. I love to do embroidery projects that my grandmother taught me how to do. There's a variety of art classes I've wanted to take forever. Never got to do any of those. The only thing I've been able to maintain kind of sort of throughout all of this is like some form of exercise. And I don't particularly love to exercise, but it's been the only thing so my anxiety presents as like rage. Okay. Like, I'm not going to feel anxious and cry or feel like crippled, paralyzed by whatever it is. I'm going to flip the absolute fuck out. Okay. So it helps me tremendously to have some sort of really hard workout to do. It's just medicine for me.
Okay.
That is really why I do it. So I'll go brutalize my body somewhere just to feel lighter by the end of it. That's the only thing I've been able to do. And there's probably other stuff that I don't even know I wanted to do, because, I have been serving.
Right.
I've been in service. So I don't, I know that makes me sound like a martyr. I don't mean that. It's just that is the reality of my experience, though. It's
right.
that, I'm putting, this came first.
I do. When's the wedding?
The wedding is March 11th. We've been laughing because it's like 311, like the band. I hate that band. I hate it. I look at it or I hear it, I see them, and I'm just like, oh, the 90s, which breaks my heart because I love the 90s. I love it. But I don't love 311. So that's bumming me out. I need to get over it. But we're going to do a very small, essentially a micro wedding at City Park. And then go have some brunch at the Ralph's on the park across the street and call it a day.
Just the two of you, or obviously with witnesses, but
oh, sure.
that kind of small.
My parents, both sets of my parents, my brothers, the kids. Adam's parents are deceased. So he has a sister
Hmm.
And so his sister and her family will be with us, and that's it.
Okay.
And then we'll pick a little something to do after, if anybody wants to come out and say
Sure.
hi, come hang out and have a drink or whatever. But that's about it. And then we'll take a proper honeymoon when school lets out in the end of May. We're going to go to
Okay.
Scotland
All right.
and cruise around over there and see what's going on.
Well, good for you.
Check some bucket list items, some beautiful hikes, and we want to go down to the lowland, like do the lowland Scotch stuff, and
Hmm.
we really like all those like really peaty Scotch. I mean, like, I want it to kill me. I want it to take the breath from my lungs like that, or I'm not happy. You know what I mean? Like, have you ever had the brand Lafroig? You know what I'm talking about?
Hmm.
I mean, it just smells like a peat bog.
Yep.
Right. And so I'm automatically like, sign me up. I'm in. Done. So we'll be able to go um, off to that little island, southwest coast, and go check out some of those things. And um,
How did you develop a kinship with Scotch? That is something I'm having trouble with.
sitting at bars, basically.
Yeah.
Try, one time, you know what it was? Um, I was at Benny's in Hammond. Have you been to Benny's?
I don't think so.
Okay. Benny's is a bar in Hammond. It's just regular. It's not like some highfalutin situation. There's pool tables, there's arcade games. It's not fancy. I was in there years ago and it was freezing. And I wanted like a hot toddy or something. And they didn't have anything really that I was looking for. And so I finally just told the guy, like, listen, I'm freezing and I need you to give me something that's going to make my insides melt.
All right.
I can't cope with, I didn't, I have a real bad attitude about the cold weather because I'm like, we didn't sign up for this. This is why we live in Louisiana. Get out of here with your freezing temperatures. Anyway, he gave me some Lafroy and I smelled it and I already knew from the first whiff, I was like, this is the thing. This is the one. And I just loved it. And it's sort of like, it's polarizing, right? People love it or hate it. I happen to love it. It falls in the category of things that are like, in one way, disgusting, but also delicious. We have things like that, like Diet Coke
Yeah.
is another one for me. I'm not comparing Scotch to Diet Coke. That's not what I mean. Taste wise or quality wise or effort wise. I know it's a long tradition, no disrespect to Scotland and its beautiful people. That's not what I'm getting at. I'm not saying Scotch is Diet Coke. I'm saying that I'm only saying that it's a little bit gross and a little bit delicious. And
Yeah.
also feels like when you drink both of them, your insides are melting. That's all I'm getting at. Um,
Okay.
so that's where it started. Benny's in Hammond, of all places. Like, nothing fancy. I wasn't like on a whiskey tour or something. Like, I was just
Right. Just
cold.
cold.
I was just
Yeah.
cold. And some genius old guy at the bar in Benny's was like, this is the thing. And he was right. And so then so I really like all those lowland Scotch, real peaty things. But then I have developed the habit where I will save them for cold weather. It
Hmm.
is too hot to drink them otherwise. It's not I don't feel good if I drink that kind of thing in the
Right.
summer, you know.
Right.
But like, this is a great week for it, where it's been like gray and chilly, and I just want to like be crabby with my scotch and a blanket. Do you like to be crabby? I love to be crabby. I'm such a jerk.
I don't know that I could agree with that.
Really?
I like to do this. Yeah.
Hmm. You like to socialize? I like to socialize too. I love to talk to people. I love to
Oh,
talk.
it's socializing on Zoom is not quite the same,
It's
but
not. You're right. But I do. I mean, I talk for a living.
yeah.
So professional talker. I'll talk all day. Do you want me to
Well,
stop talking now?
no, I'm glad you agreed to come on.
Oh, is it 11 o'clock already? Okay, yeah, we'll wrap up.
Almost.
Okay.
I appreciate you coming on, Mindy. I'll let you know
Thanks
when
for
this is
having
all
me.
done.
Okay.
Thanks
Bye.
a lot.